In less than 100 days, Iowa State and Kansas State will do battle in Dublin, Ireland, week 0, the kickoff for the college football. But what should we expect from those Cyclones when that happens? We're going to talk about it on this special Locked On crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Cyclones.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into a special Locked On College crossover, Locked On Kansas State, and Locked On Cyclones. I'm your host for Locked On Kansas State, Christian Rao, joined with Nick Maravets, the host of Locked On Cyclones. We're going to dive into a fun summer school series talking about some Big 12 schools, and what a better time to start than with Farmageddon, because the world, dare I say, the universe, Nick, gets to see Iowa State and Kansas State in a standalone game to start off the college football season, week 0 in Dublin, Ireland. Still at 11 a.m. Central Time, though. I mean, we still have to get that nice and early, although it's going across the pond. But it should be an epic game. It always is. I love Farmageddon, and I'm really excited to dig into this. But today's episode, we're going to dive into Iowa State, what happened to them this offseason after losing in the Big 12 championship game, but doing well in the Pop-Tart Bowl. So got a little good parts there. Before we dive into that, though, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So check out FanDuel right now. We're going to talk more about FanDuel later on this episode because we have some way too early odds from our friends at FanDuel, the win totals, the over-unders. And Nick, I got to get your thoughts on that. But let's dive into the offense. And I think that's a good place to start when you're talking about a team. Obviously, you talk about the signal caller. You and I had a conversation on yesterday's episode talking about the two quarterbacks that we have on our squads with Avery Johnson and Iowa State's Rocco Becht. Just give us a little brief kind of conversation of what we talked about yesterday and lead us into this offensive standpoint of Rocco Becht is going to lead the charge this year. Obviously, we're going to rule out any injury concerns from any player heading into the season. It's Rocco Becht's team. He had a good year last year. I have heard some rumblings that there was some times where he fell off towards the end. I want to hear what your thoughts on that is. But where do you think and where do you see Rocco Becht heading into the new year and getting ready to go in Dublin, Ireland?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Definitely knock on wood about 100,000 times, as every Cyclone fan, I'm sure, agrees with me there. Yeah, I agree. Injury concerns all aside, I think that this Cyclone team is poised for a very strong offensive season. And to look at Rocco specifically, the main concern, as we said yesterday, is the loss of Higgins and Knoll. Obviously, both 1,100-yard wide receivers, the only duo to do it in the entire country. So I can see why there would be an element of, can he repeat without those two studs, two Houston Texans now, obviously at the NFL level? I absolutely think so. And we talked yesterday about why I think the tight ends are going to contribute, why I think the wide receivers that transferred in are going to be a big deal, and why I think the running backs, could do the same. And obviously we'll dive into more of those names for you Kansas State fans out there in just a second. But I think that the unit as a whole on offense is very much ready to roll on offense. Now, as far as Rocco falling off, I'm not concerned. Look at him in that Pop-Tart Bowl. Unbelievable. It's an element of everybody, at the end of the season. I am not worried about what happened at the end of last year. Rocco had a whole season to learn from coming into this year. Obviously, a lot of film study, a lot of looking back at what he could have done better, what he did very well, practicing those things that he could have maybe gotten a little bit more right, I suppose. Not maybe the best terminology there, but I am not worried about Rocco at all. It's more about the rest of the team surrounding Rocco, because we said yesterday, I think Rocco is absolutely an NFL caliber quarterback come, maybe not next year, but the year after for sure.
All right. Well, I think one of the biggest things you brought up right there in that kind of introduction that popped my interest right away was that wide receiver portion. Obviously, Higgins and Noel no longer there, and they were a nuisance to the Big 12 last year. What they were, I mean, you were talking about a lot of target shares though that are no longer there with Iowa State this coming season. So basically, a brand new wide receiver core for Rocco Becht to work at to see if they can find themselves back in the Big 12 championship. How do you feel about this wide receiver core after them, bringing in some new players, probably for the portal, I'm guessing? I'm sure you have some names there. And just overall, how you feel about it? Do you have some confidence as we get ready for fall camp?
Absolutely. So obviously Higgins and Knoll, two huge names. To say that we would miss them would be an understatement. I'm not going to sit here and say that we're going to be better off right now, just because we don't know for sure. We might be. Who knows? I just don't know at this point. Now, there were some transfers in, as you mentioned, Chase Sowell of East Carolina, and then Xavier Townsend of UCF, the two big names there. Very similar kind of builds to Higgins and Knoll. Chase Sowell at 6'4", Xavier Townsend at 5'11". We mentioned yesterday that Xavier Townsend, childhood friend of Rocco Becht, that could play into the chemistry factor there. But another name that I would like to mention here is one that I think that not only Cyclone fans should look out for, but also you Kansas Staters out there. Isaiah Alston transferred out, a guy that I was very high on, but I think that only pushes this name up even higher. Eli Green. Now, am I guaranteeing that he is going to be an absolute dog this year? No, I'm not saying he's not going to either, but I think that his talent was a little bit overshadowed by Jalen Knoll and his kind of skill set and capabilities last year. So if Chase Sowell and Xavier Townsend, are what we think they're going to be, which is very, very good, I think that third wide receiver in line is going to be Eli Green, standing at a 5'11", 195 on the spring football roster there. I have very high hopes for what Eli Green can bring, and I think that the reason we haven't really seen that level of production is just because of how good those last receivers were last year. I think that really is going, and that's kind of what I'm saying, right? Like, that's how good they were last year. We don't need to base this year off of last year. I think that this is the perfect example of maybe last year kind of overshadowed a few guys who could really stand out this year. Eli Green is the wide receiver that I am looking at for a breakout year.
So you're saying maybe possibly an X factor here after bringing some. Okay, I'm all right with that. You got to have a few of those, and it doesn't always have to be like the stud wide receiver to be a guy that really can change the team. So all right, I'm gonna write that down. That's someone that's not on my radar for sure. All right, let's wrap up before I dig into the offense line because I have a question about the O line. Let's wrap up the rest of the offense, running back and tight end rooms. Anything that sticks out to you as we get ready for finishing into the summer here? I have a whole bunch of books and stuff here for the summer school, and I want to make sure we get every single position group.
Definitely. I'll try to keep it moving. At the tight end position, a group that saw injuries last year, I think that they could really make a big step coming into this next year. Benjamin Bramer, we saw the highlight all the Cyclone fans did of his catch during spring practice. Obviously, it's worth mentioning. It's worth putting some kind of focus into, I suppose. Gabe Burkle, we all know how good he was at the end of last year, especially. But Cooper Alexander is a name that I think could really step up for the Cyclones. A redshirt freshman, very young dude, but the ceiling is so high for him. I am very excited about him. And then at the running back position, yes, you're going to have running backs, right? Like these true running backs like Carson Hansen. And I think we all remember Farmageddon 2 years ago in the snow and what Abu Sama did in that game. I will never forget that. So both of those guys gaining more experience last year. But a name, River Peppers, stood out to me. Matt Campbell mentioned him specifically in the passing game. So if you want to talk about Rocco Becht, this passing unit as a whole, I think River Peppers is at least worth mentioning, and maybe some special packages, getting him in a bit of a bubble screen or a kind of a swing out option, whatever it might be. Who knows? Maybe he can even spread the field deep. I don't know what it will be, but Matt Campbell liked him, so immediately goes, yeah, let's maybe look at that guy.
All right. On the offensive line side, I covered this story earlier in the year when we were getting ready for spring camp. We kind of both had the same type of spring camp, if you will. We both did some strength and conditioning. There was only a limited amount of spring practices. And there was a report that came out. I believe it was actually somebody who you had in the show, if I remember correctly, from 24/7, talked about how the offensive line is working really hard, and every single practice in spring is going to matter. And on the flip side, for Kansas State, they were really focused on the strength and conditioning. It really didn't seem like they were focused on the spring practices itself. With that being said, just as an outsider looking in, the first thing that came to my mind is the offensive line maybe potentially the biggest issue or biggest concern on Iowa State heading into the new year? What do you think about that?
Well, here's the thing. I think if I were to circle one position group, it would be the offensive line. Just, I'm going to call it how it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, Matt Campbell spoke very, very, very highly of the offensive line. Now, we saw some guys leaving, but we saw Derek Jensen and Austin Barrett on the way in. Young talent that we'll probably see more of down the line, but nonetheless, talent on the inside. Brendan Black, obviously you mentioned, I believe Alec Bussey is who you were mentioning there. Talked
Yes.
about Brendan Black, and there were some questions that came up during spring training and spring practice or whatever. Brendan Black was mentioned multiple times. I've got plenty of names. If you want to see more about the offensive line, go to Locked On Cyclones. We've talked about it before. We'll probably talk about it again. In my opinion, offensive line, not the greatest of all the positions, but the bright side is Matt Campbell very, very high on this position group.
All right. I'm going to get your thoughts more about the whole team as a whole as we get further on in this episode, but let's dive over to the defensive side right after we talk about today's sponsor. And today's sponsor of this special Locked On College crossover is FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and you can't miss moments, whether it is a game-winning shot, a breakout player. It just never gets a better time to get on the action, Nick. Eastern Conference Finals, Western Conference Finals, we're down to 4 teams right now. What I love about this one is that I'm a true underdog kind of guy. That's like one of my kind of just good feelings. And I think if you're a true fan and you don't have the favorite and your team's out, maybe I think you always like to root for the underdog as well. Seeding wise, it may not be the underdog, but all 4 of these teams either have never won an NBA championship or haven't won it in over 50 years. So we're getting a brand new champion in that last 50 years, and we're going to get a brand new champion for the 7th time in 7 straight years. Pretty cool for the NBA. What do you think about that?
Tyrese Halliburton? Underrate that.
Yeah. Iowa State Cyclone very own could be a finals MVP. It really could. Against the Knicks, that is a fun rivalry right there. And FanDuel makes it easier to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, same game parlays. Fans have more ways to play than ever before to win smart and win big. And you talk about Halliburton. Imagine this type of same game parlay, right? Halliburton and Brunson. Not only are they rivals on like the WWE SmackDown things that they like to do these days, but they're also going to be, I think, in head on head with a crazy rivalry game. I have that series going at least 6 or 7 games because it's just going to be an absolute bloodbath in my opinion. But a same game parlay with both of those, maybe over points all day. How could you not be excited about getting $200 in bonus bets if that first $5 bet wins? And Halliburton could help you out with that.
Absolutely. He's the guy.
Yeah. So if you're new to FanDuel, it's a perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place that first $5 bet. And if it wins, guess what? You win a $200 bonus bet victory. So make every moment count with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to this special college crossover edition of Locked On Kansas State, Locked On Cyclones. It's all about the Cyclones, and dare I say, because I know when we look at the schedule, you have to go against the Iowa Hawkeyes at one point. I have a feeling that you think that Iowa is a Cyclone state. Am I right?
Oh, yeah, and you got to hit subscribe down below to help me prove that it is, in fact, a Cyclone state.
All right. I love it. That's the best love that I'm going to give you here. That's the farthest that I'm going on this.
And let's very nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the best thing. I bet you do. See, it's too early, right? We're less than 100 days. When we get less than 50 days, I think we might be hat might turn on backwards. We might actually, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it won't be as nice on these episodes. Let's talk about the defensive side, Nick, because to me, I think the defense is super interesting. And you did lose a lot of players, some to the NFL draft. And to me, it could be really it could be a win-lose situation here for Iowa State. When I looked at the statistics going into this one, prepping for this episode, they asked you some questions to try and get a good feel on how Iowa State is and the vibe check, if you will. less than 100 days out from Dublin. I looked at last year. Turnover margin tied for 22nd in the country at +9, pretty dang good. They were best in the country at passing yards allowed, at allowing less than 166 yards per game. No better team in all of FBS was as good as Iowa State when it came to pass defense. But on the other hand, they were towards the bottom, 109th in the country in stopping the run. Is the same identity going to happen this year? Are they going to have a dominant secondary, but some issues up front? Or do you think some of that has changed heading into the new year?
Pause for dramatic effect. No, we are not going to have the same identity, and it's not really anything against the secondary. It's the linebackers. Okay, I'm going to point out a few names here. Last year, the linebacker unit was absolutely decimated. Okay. Caleb Bacon missed 13 games. Carson Willick missed 14. John Klosterman, 10. Will McLaughlin, 9. Caleb Brazina, 6. Zachary Lovett, 4. These guys are back on the field now, and they're better than ever. This linebacker unit is going to you talk about the run defense versus the pass defense. Yes, the pass defense last year was very, very good. It was exciting. It was a lot of fun to be ranked that highly in the nation. I get it. But I think that this linebacker unit, the way I've been looking at it, what does a linebacker do? They cover the run, they cover the pass. They can do it both. I think with all of these names back, with all these big, very, very good players back in the lineup playing consistently, we're not only going to see a step up in the run game, because I do think the defensive line, and I'm sure you'll ask me this, is maybe an area where Iowa State could be forced to step up, is how I'll phrase it, but the linebackers can fill that hole. The secondary, there are some maybe question marks there, but guess what? Linebackers drop into coverage all the time. I think that this defense as a whole is going to be benefited greatly from the return of these linebackers, and obviously more. I am so excited to see what this linebacker unit brings to this Iowa State team, not only on the run side, but also on the pass side, and just as a leadership role as a whole.
Well, your pass secondary was already really good last year based on what I just mentioned earlier in this episode. Does that remain the same? Did you lose too many players, or is there enough next man up ready to go for the defensive secondary? How's your corners and your safeties look? If you think the linebacking core is going to improve, obviously if health wins heading into the season, is the secondary going to improve even more if you have that much help in front of them?
Well, there were some big names that left Iowa State through the secondary, of course, but I do think that there are a few that will step up this year. Jontez Williams, a name that we've seen a lot of, and Benny Ngoye, a guy who transferred from the wide receiver position to the cornerback position, kind of the similar transition of Darian Porter, like that DP kind of move, and such success from DP. Of course, that's what we're going to kind of expect to see from Benny Ngoye, and we've heard just how successful Benny Ngoye was during his high school career at the defensive back position. So I have high hopes there. I will say, though, my only apprehension is when coaches were asked kind of about this DB position, secondary position, it didn't really feel like they had a full kind of leader ironed out. There were big names last year, and all of the Cyclone fans out there know exactly who I'm talking about. But there were some big names that were big leaders in the secondary last year. I don't know if right now, we have a lot of time, but right now, I don't know if we have those names set in stone. So that's the only thing I am semi kind of apprehensive of. We don't have a Bo Freeler out there. But I think that this secondary will come around, and they will definitely, to answer your question, be aided by that linebacker unit, a team that is, or I guess a unit that is going to be significantly better than what was forced out on the field last year.
Well, just like the offensive side, it sounds like the potential concern, other than what you just mentioned with looking for a leader in the secondary, it looks to be the trenches once again. And spoiler, I think it might be the issue on Kansas State as well, which we're going to talk to tomorrow when we dig into it. Defensive line, pass rush, you talk about the linebacking core being good. Secondary obviously has some big you were 109th in stopping the run last year. How does that get better?
Well, you have to have the defensive line step up. And the big name that everybody's going to talk about is Dominique Orange. Okay. Now, obviously, chose not to go to the draft, come back to Iowa State, wanted to better his game, put better numbers up. I get it. We need to see it. He needs to be that 3-down kind of guy, as opposed to, I don't remember what the fraction they were throwing out was, but it was significantly lower. It was nowhere near what I wanted it to be. There are some other names on this defensive line kind of roster right now that are relatively exciting. I just need to see it. But I think Dominique Orange stepping up, he has the ceiling. He has the talent. We just need to see the conditioning come through and the play to play consistently, consistently be there for Dominique Orange to really, I think, set this team up for some defensive success. Because everybody knows the secondary can only cover for so long. I want to see this pass rush make a big step forward this year. I thought last year was probably the weakest portion of our game. Yes, I know the run defense wasn't good, but I thought the pass rush wasn't very good either. That's what I want to see the biggest step as far as the Cyclone defense this year.
All right. Well, now it's time to get some way too early certified takes from Nick, some that I'm going to probably hold him to for the entire season, because it seems like something that I would do. We're going to talk about that next, right here on this special Locked On College crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Cyclones. Welcome back to the show. Christian Rao, Nick Maravets here for the special Locked On crossover. If you haven't already, wherever you're listening or watching, hit subscribe, rate 5 stars, do whatever you need to do. Join the adventure here that we are bringing you content like no other, your team every day. Let's dive in. Before we do actually dive into this, where I'm going to have you take some certified takes, let's kind of wrap up what we just talked about real fast. Offensively and defensively, I'm going to ask you one question here. You can pick either side of the ball. Who is your number one favorite transfer that is coming into Iowa State this year? If you had to pick one that you think the fans are just going to absolutely love and think he's just going to be a big X factor, who would it be if you had to pick just one?
Okay. That is such a difficult question. I want to make this very, very clear. Every Iowa State transfer I have been very excited about. The first name that comes to mind, Chase Sowell. But I'm going to tell you, he's not my pick. Okay. Every Cyclone fan out there probably shaking their heads, probably like, oh, what is this guy even talking about? I'm picking this guy because we haven't talked about him enough because he wasn't a part of this spring practice kind of period. Tomatoa McDonough from Yale could be the guy on the defensive line. I didn't mention him in that last segment just because we don't know what he's going to do in an Iowa State University uniform, but he could be the guy, right? And so I am kind of picking that based on ceiling, and obviously that's what kind of every transfer is. But on the defensive line, I'd love to see it there more than I just talked so highly about the receiving unit as a whole, that whole offense. I want to see Tomatoa step up for the Cyclones this year, and I think he could be the guy.
I love it. I love how you still found a way to sneak in two with your answer too. I like that. How you quietly did that. I like that. Hey, looking at your schedule, I'm not going to lie to you. I think you got lucky. I think you got a really good schedule. When you look at it, obviously you got to take on Kansas State in the beginning of the year, neutral site in Dublin, which is going to be a great game. Really excited for that one. I am really excited for that one. But then you play 2 games at home against South Dakota and Iowa to end your non-conference, to go into your non-conference. Then your first road game is to Arkansas State, a Sun Belt team. And then your only road games, this is when I look at the schedule right away, it's like, man, you got lucky with these road games. In the Big 12 conference play, your road games this year are at Cincinnati, at Colorado, at TCU, and at Oklahoma State. I mean, out of all of those, TCU probably the toughest. Go ahead.
You missed one. The road game of the Big 12 championship. Technically, we won't play that at home.
That's a neutral location if you got that far. But okay. All right. Fair enough. We don't know what Oklahoma State's going to be. You have to assume I think you and I have been know more about Big 12 football than most. And I think we can say that the parity of this conference is so unpredictable. I mean, look at what happened with Arizona State last year. No one predicted them to go what they did. And no one predicted Utah and Oklahoma State to be towards the bottom. Really didn't expect that to happen. I imagine that those teams are going to find a way to get better, but someone's got to be at the bottom. And you have Oklahoma State on the road, TCU on the road, who Sonny Dykes could be in the hot seat. Colorado, who is without Travis Hunter and Shador for the first time in the Deion Sanders era. We don't know what that's going to look like. And then Cincinnati, who to me is just the team that doesn't belong in the Big 12. Shocker. But that's your road schedule. You have some tough teams though. Don't get me wrong. You got to play Kansas State, BYU, Arizona State. But all of those teams are either in a neutral location or in Ames. That's a really good feeling to have. And when we look at our friends from FanDuel, your over under for win totals is at 7.5. Now, I'm kind of being a teaser here and kind of taking away your thunder, but I feel like that's an easy over, Nick. I really do.
Yeah, no, I think that I have their floor at 8. So I am not giving any advice here of any kind, but that's where my floor is at. Okay. Now, looking at the schedule, one thing you didn't point out is the kind of spreading out of the buys. They'll play 4 games, then a bye, 3 games, then a bye, 3 games, then a bye, 2 games, then the Big 12 championship. I like that spread very, very much. You're not running like 6 games in a row and then like a weird kind of game buy situation. It's very evenly spread. I like that a lot. Now, I said obviously the floor I think is kind of maybe an 8-win team. I think their ceiling is around 2 wins. And just to quickly kind of run through this here, not to be too kind to Kansas State, but I do think that game could be potentially a coin flip. All right. So let's say we're doing ceiling. That's a win. Obviously, I think they beat South Dakota and Arkansas State. I think they beat Iowa by about 9 million points. So not really close there. You're looking at 4-0 going into the first bye. Arizona, Cincinnati, Colorado. Of those first 2, I think you get them both. I think we talked about yesterday, maybe that Arizona might not be on that same playing level. That might have been off your, sorry to maybe air out that, but nonetheless, Cincinnati, you just mentioned where you think they will be. Colorado, though, I do think could be a bit of a problem because that's obviously on the road. And then you look at BYU, Arizona State there, 3 games with a bye in there, but 3 games very tough. I think Iowa State might drop 2 of those. So you're looking at potentially 2 losses through those. Then you got TCU, Kansas, Oklahoma State. And that's where I think that ceiling lies. Now, the floor, you probably drop Kansas State. You might lose to Iowa, but it's at home. I don't think that's the one I would pick. I would rather go with 1 or 2 of the Colorado, BYU, Arizona State kind of stint there. And then it's Iowa State. At times we're going to struggle. There's going to be a Kansas who's going to blow through town on some hot streak, or, maybe TCU, we just catch them at a wrong time on the road. I'm kind of taking the floor and looking at it like Iowa State could catch a team at the wrong time because that feels like the team that we've been for a long time. Nonetheless, I think the floor is probably about 8 wins. Then the ceiling, we're looking at the back-to-back 10-win teams for the Cyclones, in obviously the first 2 of all time. To do it back-to-back would be absolutely insane.
That would be crazy. And you're right. You look at teams like Kansas, like teams like TCU towards the end of your schedule, that could be a tough little stretch. And immediately I looked at the road schedule and that was like, oh, it's easy. But, October 25th, November 1st, November 8th, there's no buys there. And that's BYU, Arizona State, TCU. Like that could be a tough stretch. And assuming that you get out of Colorado alive on the road. So
I will say,
8-4.
I will say really quickly, both of those road games, TCU, Oklahoma State down south at the end of the year, that will probably, well, I guess, what do you think? Do you think that'll help? Do you think that'll hurt? Because Iowa State might have that home field advantage being used to that kind of cold weather, but also Iowa State capable of playing at that high level in the warmer weather. I guess it's just kind of up to viewer discretion where you want them. But I thought immediately when I saw that, I'm like, okay, Iowa State has a chance to play in warm weather at the end of the year. That feels like an advantage.
Yeah, I think you're right with that one. I think 8 is definitely a good rule for a floor here. That's why if I was with you, if I was betting with our buddies at FanDuel right now, 7.5 wins, I would take the over, and I'm sure you would too. Now, you keep talking about this Big 12 championship like you're going to return there. And if you do, you'll probably take on the Kansas State Wildcats in week 0 and in championship weekend. So let's just assume that you make it there, right? Let's just say you make the Big 12 championship. Or even if you don't, you're close to the very top. Maybe there's some tiebreakers. You're close to being in a large bid. What do you feel about making the college football playoffs? Do you think Iowa State has a good shot at making one of the 12 teams this year?
I do. I think Iowa State's going to put up a really solid resume. Some tough opponents that I think they will beat. You look at some of these other teams in the Big 12. I do think this is going to be a really solid year for the Big 12 as far as record goes. But how many teams will have the resume? BYU is a team that stands out, but you got Portland State, Stanford, East Carolina in there. I mean, I guess Iowa State, but you got Iowa, who's a Big 10 team. So I don't know exactly who's going to be at the top. I do think it will be relatively top heavy compared to years past, but also I think that Iowa State's going to have some quality wins. And if something were to happen where they lose in the Big 12 game, and let's just pretend that it wasn't by 50 points, I think that the resume that they had to get to that point under those circumstances, I think they'd make the Big 12 or the 12 team playoff.
All right. End this conversation here, the special Locked On College crossover, with maybe the easiest question you have to answer. At the end of the season, when it's all said and done, when we are in the offseason next year again, who are we going to be able to say was the best player on Iowa State this coming season?
I feel like if you don't say Rocco, that's going to be a tough one. I feel like you have to go Rocco Becht. I know that's a gimme, but like everything else to me feels like just a shot in the dark. I'm going to take the sure answer. Give me Rocco Becht. I think that a lot of people are sleeping on him. So maybe it's not a sure answer to many, but to me, it feels like it's a gimme. I feel bad about taking that, but I couldn't do anything else.
Well, Kansas State and Iowa State both heading and looking to get to the college football playoffs in 2025/26 season. With that being said, there's going to be potentially a new Pop-Tart Bowl champion winner. Are we hoping it's another Big 12 team, or are we hoping that goes to a different conference? What are we hoping here?
Oh, give it to Big 12. Come on. I'm a Big 12 guy.
Yeah, same here. Big 12 believer all day. That was a trick question. I'm glad you finished. Nick, where can everyone find you at Locked On Cyclones, and where they can find your work on social media?
At Nick_Marv on Twitter, at Locked On Cyclones on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts every single day. We're covering the Cyclones. We're getting into the nitty-gritty as well as the national news. It's a fun time. Be sure to stop by. Obviously, Locked On Kansas State. Where can they find you? Because I know you put out good work as well.
Yeah, on Twitter, Locked On K-State, and then anywhere you can listen to podcasts and YouTube. Tomorrow, we're going to keep joining this conversation. Nick's going to join me one more time. We're going to have another one. Hope you aren't sick of our voices together, having a good time having this conversation. But we're going to do the Kansas State side of this. Well, we're less than 100 days, folks. This is getting exciting that we're getting closer and closer to the college football kickoff. It's going to happen quick. It's going to be really quick. And Nick gave you a good feel on what Iowa State's going to look like and how they're potentially most likely going to just finish 8-4 with their floor. I'm going to tell you tomorrow, while Kansas State is going to win the Big 12 championship and will be in the college football playoffs. So Nick wasn't as confident as I was, but I'll let you know that more tomorrow.
I made it very clear.
I have the remote. I'll talk to you guys later. Please like the video. Please subscribe. This has been Locked On College Crossover.